Hey guys, Harry here again, and we're jumping straight back into the take 5 for today. Although it might end up being called take 6 at the minute, because everyone I've been doing over the last few days is about 6 minutes, so sorry about that. But just to take a couple of minutes of your time this morning, or this afternoon, this evening, we're looking at Acts chapter 16 today. Yeah, really cool chapter, lots going on, but I was particularly drawn to the final part of the chapter, from sort of verse 25 to 40, where we find Paul, who is also now with a guy called Silas. They found themselves in jail together because they just upset some local slave owners who were making money out of their slave. But anyway, they got beaten up, they got chucked in jail for it, and so here they are. And then what happens is they're kind of shackled in prison, and at midnight Paul and Silas are just praying, they're singing, even though they're in chains, and they're, singing to God, praising Him, and then all of a sudden this massive earthquake happens. And, it says here, the foundations were shaken, the doors were opened, and chains were unfastened, and I love that. But the particular focus that I'm going to be looking at this morning is actually about the jailer. This poor jailer, there's this earthquake happens, and the foundations were shaken, the prison doors were flung open, and all these chains were unfastened. For this poor bloke, actually, this was more than just a bad day. This is pretty awful, and we see that in his response. What happens here is that the jailer, who's supposed to be making sure that these guys don't escape, he suddenly panics and realizes, oh my goodness, this is just the worst day ever. Draws his sword, and in that moment it says that he's about to kill himself, he's about to take his own life, which is just so sad, right? But in this moment I just see that actually, sorry, that was a squirrel, I'm so distracted sometimes, but it's in moments, this just exposes something in us, doesn't it? And in this moment right here in this passage, this really serious moment where this jailer actually considers taking his own life, we just see him, he's just undone. He's undone by this lack of control and this loss of control that he can't do anything about, right? And he just suddenly spirals quickly into desolation, into chaos, and ultimately into this thought of death. But this reminds me of like a rabbit in a snare, where actually the snare is just like a loop. It's a simple, really simple mechanism. But the rabbit gets bolted into it, gets stuck in it, starts thrashing around, making it worse, and he's just got no chance of getting out. And this kind of spiralling that just basically leads to its death. And this kind of reminds me of that snare, right? But if that rabbit was able to, is it just got caught in that snare, if it was able to just have that moment to be still and to really understand how that snare works, it would just be able to back out, it would just be able to slip out and carry on with its thing, But sometimes it's so true for us too, isn't it? Sometimes we lose control and we feel that loss of control just spiral, and it can send us into desolation. It can send us into, just feeling, oh, I just don't know what to do, I'm a failure, I just can't, this responsibility, I'm not good enough to take it. And before you know it, we can find ourselves end up kind of looking at chaos and looking at situations where we're considering death as the only option, right? But what we see here is that we all need to be able to, in those moments of panic, those moments of loss of control, just like that jailer was facing, right? We need to be able to go, be still. Because we know that scripture so well, don't we? Be still and know that I am God. We know that, everybody knows that scripture. Even if you're a new Christian, it's probably one of the first scriptures you will hear, right? Be still and know that I am God. But I wonder actually, that practice of actually being still and knowing that He is God, when it actually matters, when actually everything seems to be going wrong, that's when it's the most powerful. And that's what we see here for that desperate jailer, but luckily, Paul was there and he cried out to him in that moment. He's like, don't do anything, mate. You know, we are all here, we haven't run off, we're still in the prison. But in that moment of that potential where actually it could have spiraled out of control, this moment of panic where he seemed to just think there's no other way of going out, like he was able to reinterpret that actually as an invitation from God to be still. And I wonder in our lives, when actually that chaos happens, that panic happens, that loss of control happens, are we able to see those as invitations from God to be still and to draw into him? Because actually what happens off the back of that is that we see in this passage that not only him, but his entire household is saved. And if that isn't a miraculous and transforming power of Jesus, I don't know what is, you know. But isn't it so true when we hear about testimonies of other people? But it's when you're at your lowest, your weakest, your most vulnerable point, where if you're able to just be still and look up and fix your eyes on Jesus, that he can do the most incredible things. And so you might have your own stories of those, and I just maybe encourage you to pray into people that you know that are probably going in through a bit of a downward spiral, or that may be feeling a loss of control in life at the moment. Pray for these guys and pray that they would see that that is an opportunity and an invitation for God to them to be still and maybe have an encounter with him. So I'll leave that with you for today. Take care, guys.